Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this session on creative AI and speculative futures. I'm delighted to welcome our first speaker to the panel, Elham KargarTazargh. We will have 6 papers. Each paper will have 10 minutes of presentation and afterwards 5 minutes of Q&A. So, Elham, the stage is yours.
Hello everyone, welcome to this session where I want to tell you a story about one of my passion projects that I work with Simon Kirstein. So once we are talking about the moments that shaped us, it's always coming with the time that our older generations was sharing their insight and the wisdom with us. Grandparents and grandchildren relationship is one of the most powerful human bonds. This relationship is having a mutual benefits for grandchildren and grandchildren and grandparents. Because grandchildren is always seeing the grandparents as their safe havens, that they can go there because of the care and continuous care that they received from them. So in the teenage challenges, they can rely on them to get more advice from them. But it's also benefiting grandparents because they can have the help of the grandchildren to connect them with the future ideas, how to use the technology, and also it can renew their purpose so they can see themselves as a cultural bridge between 2 generations. And this time that they are spending together is really important how they are building on this relationship. But think about the time that COVID hits. There was a time that there was restrictions for traveling and it was impossible to meet the people in person. So we needed to rely only on technology to connect us. Yes, phone calls and video calls are important tools to be in contact, but we are missing the context. And it's really difficult to keep the grandkids engaged within those calls. Right now, there are some solutions that you can have the remote storytelling with the grandchildren between these 2 generations, or the family members can be characters of a storybook, so they can be more involved together. And some of these apps are working on more about the memory collections and photo sharings between these generations. But all of them are in the offline mode. And what we are missing is we are lacking a virtual space that can replicate these in-person activities that we are doing together, even if we are in distance. So before finding any solutions, we really need to understand our target user needs. And you are asking me why we have parents as a target users. Because of the age of kids that they are, our target user was between 6 to 10 years old. We couldn't get the information directly from them, so we needed to rely on the parents' inputs for this research. This research was done in November 21 until February 22 with 23 parents and 15 grandparents. And the aim was to understand what are the shared activities that they would like to do, how grandparents are seeing the storytelling. Do they prefer special topics, or they would prefer more kind of open space to talk with each other? And how is the kids' size? What is the activity that they would like to do? Is painting the kind of main activity that they would like to share it with the others, or they can see it more private? After having these answers, we realized that we can have a playful approach where we are supporting grandparents and grandchildren to meet each other in the real-time audio and video. And also they will have a shared digital canvas as a paper to paint on it together. And at the end, they can preserve this digital artwork. And as you can see, they can sign up through the systems with their phone number, and then in the gallery, they can watch their previous call recordings. And we have a concept of joining the call by creating or joining the room. By creating a room, you will receive a code. You need to share it with the other parties. And meanwhile, they are joining to this call. You can create your color palettes for the painting. Was it a happy end story? No. We are living in the real world that if something works at the first, there's something wrong there. Here we were using Figma for our prototyping with 2 parents and 3 grandparents. So some of them was in person and some were remotely, and I was asking them to think aloud and finishing the task. So one of the most important issues that we had was related to this call management. Should I join a call? How can I use this code that I received? Why should I use third app to share this invitation code? And there were some usability issues and that we needed to solve. And at the end, parents were asking me, so what about grandparents select the color palettes and the kids won't like it? How do you want to solve these issues? Is there possibility to change these colors or somehow? And I was like, sorry, as of now, no. So here we had a design twist. The main problem was this call management. In the first one, you can see the concept that it was just like joining and creating. But in the second phase, we introduced a friend list, where you can search for your friends, calling them directly through the app, and we are solving one issue. Then we work on the kind of usability issues, and we increase the dimensions of buttons, input fields, and right now, both parties can select the color palettes for themselves. So we are fine. Okay, so let's see how it looks like in the reality. I use Unity for implementations, and the test device was Android. 5 family joined this research, this kind of testing phase through the 6 weeks. And at the first, I was asking about the durations, frequency of the calls, and getting more context about how they are meeting each other now. I need to say that there was no significant change in the durations or frequency of the calls. But we saw a new kind of pattern of more active engagements from the kids in the calls. And there was a new emergence use case by one of these family. So grandma was a retired teacher and wanted to teach the grandson how to write in Persian. So they were using this shared canvas to write to each other together on the same canvas and learning about how to correct the mistakes and how can they use it. So I can say that we can see painting and storytellings in a shared virtual space can help both parties to get closer with each other. However, there are some limitations of our story like any other projects. First of all is that we have a very small sample size and number of participants in each study phase. I had some challenges with recruiting the English-speaking grandparents. So I needed to focus on Iranian families, and by that, these projects might have some kind of biases that we are carrying on. And also, we miss a lot of inputs from the children. So because of the age limitations, I couldn't ask them direct inputs to understand them better so we can answer those challenges. What is for the future that we can work on that? First of all is that we need to work on the feature enhancements for painting, giving them more brush sizes, more colors and the possibility of creating new canvases once they are in the same call. We really need to work on the video call quality because we had some bugs in the implementation phase that some of the family needed to drop the call immediately and they couldn't have a kind of longer calls. And this might affect on patterns that we couldn't see any kind of change in the frequency or duration. So of course we need to still work on the UX for grandparents who are not tech savvy. It can be easier for them to follow. And longer study, more than 6 weeks, with the more diverse participants. Okay, so I would like to take a moment here and having a special thanks to all the families and individuals who help us through this research. And I would like to extend it to Simon Kirsteins for believing in my passion and navigating me through this journey. And all you brilliant people to being here and listening to this presentation. And at the end, I would like to mention that investing on the relationship of grandparents and grandchildren and this intergeneration bonds is investing in the social well-being, safety, and also cultural continuity. Thank you.
Thank you for your talk. Are there any questions from the audience? There's a question over there.
Hi, can you hear me?
It's already turned on, I think.
Hello.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Do you somehow measure this level of closeness, the level of bond, and if not, do you know if there's a way to do that?
Yeah, so about this closeness, the only measurement that I had was that how frequent they are meeting each other over the video calls. So before these 6 weeks, the way that I was measuring is that first there was an initial questionnaire asking about the type and how frequent they are meeting, how duration, how it is, what are they talking. And after each call, again, I was measuring about the activities that they are doing, about the time and durations. And at the end of this 6 weeks, we had another kind of interviewing, and I was asking their opinions from them. So this was only measurements that I could work on that, and it can be quantity. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We've got time for one more question. Okay, so I will ask a question. Do you think that your system really compensates the lack of physical presence, or is it just another way to have activity?
Yeah.
And
I can see it as an alternative way for this time that we are facing a lot of immigrant families, the times that the COVID hits. So I can say that it can replicate the in-person activities, but it can be alternative to that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So now I would like to welcome our next speaker, Philipp Tölke.
Okay, hi, my name is Philipp Tölke, and I will be talking about this installation we did, and it was displayed in the Museum of Contemporary Native Arts in Santa Fe in New Mexico. And the main artist behind it is Antoine Belma. And it was also a collaboration with Karim Gerbi and Suzanne Kite, who is a native artist from the Lakota tribe. And the installation will be about the dream language from this Lakota tradition and how we can visualize dreams of people using AI. So, as an overview, basically the installation uses multiple modalities of input from the user to then generate visualizations of their dreams. And I have this video, which I will play, and then I will just talk over it so you get some impression. And the input modalities we have are text, so users can write text about their dream, a written description. They can also draw something about their dream, and they also wear this EEG headset, which, for those who are not familiar, is like a little headband with some electrodes on your forehead, which measures brain activity. And we use this to basically get a rough estimate of their current brain state, which we use then to alter the visuals of the installation. And we incorporate the Lakota dream language into this by using their symbol language, which is a language of about 10 different symbols, which create different symbolic meaning. And in this installation, you can both draw together with these symbols, so you can add them to your drawing, and you can also see how your dream fits into this symbolic space of the Lakota language. And so to explain the installation a bit, this is a complex diagram, so I'll try to break it down. First, the input, as I said, we have drawings that also use the Lakota symbols, and we have written language, so people can just write their dreams. And then we use a clip model to embed both of these written text descriptions of the dream and the drawings into the same latent space. And then we also embed all of the symbols from the Lakota dream language into the same latent space as well. And then we just do a simple similarity comparison between the written dream and the drawn dream, and find which symbol from the language matches the dream the best. And we have this ranking that shows kind of the proximity of your dream to each of the symbols. And we display this in this constellation, which I will show more clearly later on. Additionally, we also take the drawing and the written dream and we feed that to an LLM to then write a prompt that describes a scene based on the dream, which then it goes into a stream diffusion model to generate visuals in real time that are based on the dream. And this model is also conditioned on the drawing using a control net. So you can like see your drawing come to life through the description of your dream. And we also use the brain state through the EEG to then enhance the visuals and alter them based on two main features we extract from the brain, which are brain complexity, which is just a measure of kind of focus or concentration. And we also measure dreaminess through something that is called hypnagogia, which is basically the state right before you fall asleep where you become dreamy and your mind starts drifting. And we use that to then modulate the images to enhance the complexity of the images or make them more simple based on the current brain state. And then finally, we have this mental compass, which is inspired by the medicine wheel from the Lakota tradition, which also visualizes your brain state in real time. So it shows you some kind of neurofeedback on these same two dimensions that we use to enhance the images. So yeah, I will come to this later on. I will explain this more clearly. All right, so regarding this constellation, as I said, we have 10 different symbols that you can see here. They all have some kind of shape, which are displayed in 3 dimensions here. And this constellation we created from a data set that was collected with Lakota members, and they were giving textual descriptions of these symbols, which we then embedded into a latent space, as I said, using the clip model. And then through a dimensionality reduction, we were able to generate this 3-dimensional constellation of symbols into which we can embed the dream in real time. Then this is a quick screenshot of the interface. At the top, you can see what the user sees to draw and write. At the bottom is the output, given the interface state. And basically here, you can see the different symbols that you can just drag, add to the drawing, and then kind of create your own little constellation inside your dream based on these symbols. Right here, we don't have any explanation for the symbols, but in the museum, people got also a sheet of kind of explanations for each symbol so they know what they have to do. And yeah, you can see kind of the output from the diffusion model matches roughly what the person has drawn, and it is augmented using the prompt and the EEG. Then this is the compass that I mentioned, which basically just surrounds the visual image. And it displays the current brain activity in these 2 dimensions. As I said, we have brain complexity on the vertical axis, dreaminess on the horizontal axis. So essentially, if your brain complexity is high and you're not very dreamy, so maybe you're awake and very concentrated, this compass would point to the top left. and vice versa for all the other directions, which just gives users a kind of feedback of what their brain is doing and how their kind of current state, going back to the dream, writing about the dream, thinking about it, affects their brain. And maybe if it makes it more sleepy to think about the dream, or if you're really concentrated, thinking back into the story that you were in, and just provide some feedback of kind of what your brain is doing. A quick side note on that, we're using a Muse EEG headset, which is like a consumer grade, very basic EEG. So the signal quality is not very good. And it's difficult to actually get like clear data out of that, especially if people are moving. You get a lot of movement artifacts because the muscles are stronger than actually the neurons in terms of electrical fields. So it's always difficult to use EEG in a setup like that. But if people are still and kind of really spend time getting into it, there's clear kind of feedback from the brain in there. Okay, then another kind of feature of this installation is that we allow people to contribute their dreams to this collective dream map, which is hosted online. Basically, we take their written dreams and the drawing and 5 outputs from the diffusion model. We add them to this big constellation online, and people can afterwards go look up with their code kind of where they fit into this big constellation of everyone who has contributed to the museum. And you can filter kind of by the different symbols to see if there are clusters of the dream language in all these contributions. And you can also go back and compare your visuals to other people's dreams, see maybe which dreams are close, which are far. And it's really interesting to see these like semantic clusters emerge out of dream language from people who contributed their dreams. Then finally, I want to quickly plug our tool. This is the tool we built to kind of do all the signal processing. It's free open source, so I'm not trying to sell you something. You can just take it, steal it, do whatever you want. And it's called Goofy Pipe, and it's a node-based visual interface where basically you can create these blocks. Every block does some processing, and you get this instant visual feedback inspired by Touch Designer to kind of do your signal processing in real time. And it's really meant for biosignal processing because that's what we do most. But it also works for audio. We can do text in there as well. And we integrate it together with API calls to LLMs, for example, or to image generators. So we can kind of build these large pipelines that go from biosignals directly into AI systems and combine these modalities. And then the typical workflow we have is that we take this pipeline and then we stream data out to Touch Designer or Ableton to then do either sonification or visualization of the features. Do I have time? 1 minute. Okay, quickly, I will talk briefly about this, which is an analysis we did on the collective dream map, where basically we took these 258 dreams at some point during the installation, and we ran a clustering on these to see if we can extract some kind of semantic meaning out of that, and then assigned kind of semantic labels to each of the clusters using an LLM by just providing the dream text in bulk to the LLM and asking come up with some kind of semantic label for this group. And you can see naturally out of this emerge these like very archetypal dream symbols, which is really cool to see. And in the future, we'll expand this with kind of more reports. This has been running for longer now, and then more complicated analysis on kind of finding these clusters. Because right now you can see they're not clear clusters, it's kind of just like spatial groupings of the points. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Philip, for your talk. Are there any questions? We've got time for a couple of questions. Yes, just a moment.
Thank you very much. Very inspiring work you do. Given that this is a sensitive area that you work with indigenous community and language, I'm curious to hear what measures and what procedural actions you have taken to ensure decolonial knowledge production into taking place rather than perpetuating the same extractivist logic of cultural production?
Yeah, so we actually went to the museum, which is in Santa Fe, and we had a long 2-day kind of workshop session with a lot of indigenous people there. And we discussed this whole work kind of before we set it up. So we made sure that we talk about this a lot. We make sure that people are aware of kind of what is happening in the sphere of AI and how indigenous knowledge fits into that. And we asked a lot of questions of, does this make sense for you? Is this okay given your cultural background? So we really made sure to kind of try to get that understanding and empower the indigenous people instead of just like taking their knowledge and applying it somewhere. We went into the community and worked with them to create this piece.
Okay, any other questions? Yes. We've got one more here.
Thank you for the presentation. I was wondering, did you study measure the connection between the archetyped results with the Lakota symbols? Like, have you studied the connection between them? Like, compare them, measure them?
Not fully. We have kind of started doing that a little bit. So my collaborator, Antoine Belmar, has been looking into that and kind of mapping these two semantic spaces of the archetypes we found and the symbolic language from Lakota and try to find a mapping between them, which is very preliminary for now, but definitely that's something that we're about to do. And I'm sure we'll publish on that once something is done.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you.
One more question.
Yeah, on that, I was wondering it's kind of a slightly technical question, but your archetypal mapping is in 2D and your Lakota symbols 3. I wonder if the archetypes the segmentation of those regions might be clearer if you have a third dimension to separate.
Yeah, it actually is. We looked at the 3D map, but on a 2D screen, it's always a bit difficult to show 3D maps. But yeah, if you can rotate them, you can see it's a bit more clear to see the structure in 3D, definitely.
Thank you.
I've got one more question. So how did you select the symbols? Because I wonder if there are only 10 different symbols in Lakota epistemologies. So how did you choose those?
Yeah, there aren't that many. I think there are about 12 or 13 in total. So we took the 10 most used symbols. But these are only the symbols for describing dreams. And they use these symbols in these like complex, almost mosaic arrangements where they don't just like take symbols and chain them together like we do with characters. They build these artistic maps of symbols and describe whole journeys, and they capture the narrative in this like very complex, almost fractal-like art piece using these symbols. So yeah, we focused on the 10 most relevant ones from the tradition.
And did you evaluate if those epistemologies were represented in a respectful way? So did you, you involved the community in discussing about the representation as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the main artists behind this, Suzanne Kite, she is from the tradition, from the Lakota tribe. And then, as I mentioned, through these workshops in the community, we made sure that our understanding of the symbols grows with their help, and that we're not taking their knowledge and applying it somewhere, but we're working through the community and their knowledge that is being empowered and not taken. Okay,
thank you, Philipp. So I would like to welcome the next speaker to the stage. Philipp Pasquier.
All right, I think we are live. Hello everyone, I'm Philippe Pasquier. I'm a professor at Simon Fraser School for Interactive Arts and Technology in Vancouver, Canada, where I lead the Metacreation Lab for Creative AI. And today, I'm here to present to you the latest version of Autolium, our GAN-based, no-coding, small data and model crafting visual synthesizer for artistic creation. So that's a mouthful, so let's go through that. I'll start with light motivations. In the early 2020, with the rise of generative AI, it appeared clear to everyone still to this day that there was a big of an issue with big data, and there's been a pushback on many dimensions, but one of the main ones was that artists were not really happy that the data would be scrapped and that the internet, which was meant to share, was sort of exploited in that way, and so the stakeholders pushed back. And so as a researcher in creative AI, we thought it would be a good idea to go back to what was the case before big data, which was in machine learning, small data, and model crafting. And in fact, consulting with our friends, artists, and communities of artists all over, we find that the specification of what artists want is not exactly what Californian for-profit companies are selling. Artists don't want to navigate models trained on everyone else's data. They want to train their own model on their own data. They don't want to train them on big data. They want to train them on small data sets that are manageable. They don't want usually to upload their data to the cloud. We also work with indigenous communities, and they're very skeptical of the idea of giving their life work to the internet. And so we want systems that run locally, if possible, in real time at video speed. We don't want artists, painters, and sculptors to learn how to code in Python or to master all those AI frameworks. Even graphic programming, as we just saw before, takes quite a bit of technicality. So we want a no-coding environment. We want graphical interfaces. We want it to work ideally in real time with direct manipulation. What you see is what you get, and we want the system to be free and open source so that you can eventually look at the code and make sure that the code says what it does, what it's supposed to do, and nothing else. There is, believe it or not, no such system out there. And if you know one, you let me know, because we're really interested. So we made one, and it's called Autolium. Autolium has two different types of modules. There's offline modules, so that's the one you use to train your own model, to do feature extraction, to do latent space projection, where you can find a particular image within your model, to do super resolution, because 1044 by 1044 doesn't cut it for most artwork production, so you want to be able to super res your images and your video. We also allow for model mixing, model blending. And then there's the real-time modules, which allow you to obviously explore your model through latent test navigation, and there's a variety of navigation strategies there. You can do looping, you can do model blending and model bending. You can access directly the weights of your model and modify them. Artists really like to tinker and to break those AI systems to access some aesthetics that otherwise would be hard to access. And everything can be controlled in real time through the graphic interface or through OSC controls. You can, of course, capture, export your images, your videos, and presets. And there's an NDI stream output, so you can capture the output of the system into other tools, such as Touch Designer. When I talk about direct manipulation, this is exactly what I mean here, is this idea that you can, in real time, manipulate the model and see for yourself what's interesting or not. So now I'm going to present a few artworks, a selection of artworks presented in the paper that were made with the system. We were the first users of the system. I started working with a system where we were developing it, working on audio reactive, in this case a music video, using analog footage that we had at the time, based on the music of my band Robonum. Then we worked with other artists, collaborating first with friends. My friend Erika Lapala Jensen is a visual artist in Vancouver, so we fed her artwork into the system, and she spent some time exploring it, and a number of both stills, you see a selection here, and moving images were generated as an output. Then I worked with my PhD student, Arshia Soban, with an Arabic calligrapher. And then, believe it or not, those big data models, they promise you that they're generic, that they're omniscient and omnipotent, and that they can do any images. It turns out, if you ask DALL-E or Midjourney to do Arabic calligraphy. It looks really pretty on the right here, but these are not Arabic characters. Those systems will actually fake it, which is a bias, and we know they have bias, but here we caught one. It's a bias known as Orientalism. It was already described in the 70s by Edward Said, and who noticed that the painters from the 19th century, white painters for white audiences typically, would fake the Arabic characters into their paintings. And so both because there's not enough data for those big models to learn Arabic calligraphy, the long tail of the distribution, most of the data is really Hollywood-style imagery and content, but also because the data themselves had the bias. You have this bias in those big models. In other words, if you want to generate Arabic calligraphy, you have to train a model. You have no choice. And so small data is also sometimes necessary. And of course, we derive artworks from those models ourselves. So we presented a selection of those artworks last year at the Ars Electronica Campus exhibition. So some of you might have seen some of that before. And then we continued working. Arshia is working with the model in real time here in performances with Joshua Rodenberg. That was at Isaiah this year. Joshua is actually in the room. I just saw him over there. And then we working on current interactive installations because everything works in real time. Here, Alpha Prism is an installation that is like a photo booth. It takes pictures of you, and then with DragGAN, which we're going to put into Autolium soon, it makes you smile, no matter what the face you give to the system. And then because it's real time and everything can be controlled in real time, it can be used for VJing. And so we've been working in performance settings with my drummer Kian Lee and Vijay Amagi, who is using Autolium and feeding it into Touch Designer in order to provide visual on stage. So I'll play you a little excerpt of our performance in China. I just 2 weeks ago was playing Mutec, a vision program with that show. All right, so that's an example of Autolium artwork in a performance setting. We do train people using Autolium, and we invite you to take those training. We give some workshop in festivals in Berlin, at OCAD in Toronto, NAD in Montreal, and we also give it online, so you can go, and we recorded it, so you can go and learn the system for yourself. And we got plenty of ongoing work with that particular system. We're just finishing for next week, the deadline is coming, a Kai paper on the qualitative studies based on workshop interviews with artists using Autolium. And then we keep on growing the system as well, and more collaborators we work with. And so this idea of small data, to conclude here, is really a potential rescue to these issues of big data. We talked about the fact that with big data, we have those copyright issues, plagiarism, style imitation, artists complaining that their style is being plagiarized by the system. And so we think we can do better than that with small data and avoid a little bit the aesthetic homogenization that is coming increasingly with those big models as well. We also have seen how it can allow to address some of the biases of those models. We also believe that in terms of authenticity, authorship, we really believe into seizing the means of production. Okay, you can prompt a big model trained on immense data. But first, legally speaking, philosophically speaking, prompting is probably not enough for creation. In fact, it doesn't warrant you authorship under most legislations. And so we do believe that the idea of training your own model on your own data gives you a lot more authorship on the output of those models. There's also interesting conversation to be had around the phenomenology of artistic practice and what it means to do it one way or another. And eventually, small data is also cheaper, both financially and environmentally, for to use. So with that, stay small, everyone. And if you want to learn Autolium, this is the QR code to the system. And if you want to see more of the work we do in the lab, this is the QR code there. With that, I'm going to thank the funding bodies that support our work in Canada, both the scientific, the humanities, and the artistic work. And if you are in Belgium next week, I will be at a conference that I started called the AI Music Creativity Conference, was in Oxford last year, will be in Berlin next year, and this year we're in Brussels at the Vrije University of Brussels. It starts Wednesday, talks during the day, concerts during the evening. It's going to be fun.
Thank you, Philip. Questions from the audience? Are there any questions? Yeah, over there.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. My question would be, what kind of hardware do you need to run this?
Excellent question. So you can run it on CPU only, but it's going to be very slow, 4-5 frames per second. But if you have a GPU, so typically you need a GPU, an RTX, NVIDIA, because you need to run CUDA. And so any gamer machine would work. So typically you need to find someone who has a kid who is playing games, and that's the computer you want. And there's something very satisfying in putting your pictures in there and starting a model training and going to bed and knowing that that microprocessor and that GPU is working for you all night long. Because most of the time you buy computers, we all have plenty of processors around us, and those processors do nothing. We're being oversold computing. That's a different story in the history of computing, but I believe in computing as shared resources, and I think we are building with those type of tools AI commons, and that's much more interesting than doing everything in the cloud, which is entirely proprietary and not public at the moment.
Thank you, Philip. Fascinating work you do. I might be asking an obvious question, but what is small data? How do you define it? And when you know it's small and not big and not something in between?
Yeah, another very good question. Well, small is very relative, and with Autolium you can really train with just a few images, a couple dozens, but you can also go with hundreds. Or you can feed in your videos and extract every frame or every 10 frames and end up with hundreds of thousands or hundreds of thousands of images. So technically, if you're not in the billion or in the several millions, you're small.
Okay, thank you. Sounds encouraging.
Are there any other questions? Yeah, one more. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. My question is kind of related. Do you allow to use pre-trained models? Because if you do, it kind of falls into the same bias problem that you described before. And maybe like second question, do you get the feedback from the artist about, because the result that you want to get really depends on the size of the data set. And if you want something more abstract, yeah, you can work with a smaller one. Like, do you get this feedback where artists like face this kind of problem with their small data being too small?
That's right. And you definitely can do, with Autolium, you can do fine-tuning. So you can start with an existing model, maybe a bigger model, if it's been ethically sourced on ethical data, because not all the big data is necessarily bad, always. And then you can fine-tune it. So for example, you can take a face model from NVIDIA and take your collection of portraits. We did that with a photographer. His name is Chris Krug. And refine a model from a big model, fine-tune a model on his particular aesthetic in this case. So that's an option. And there is also something to be said about the fact that, of course, it's not going to look like stream diffusion or stable diffusion, trains on billions, if not trillions of images. But some artists really like the fact that this is style GAN to ADA. It has a particular aesthetic. It has a particular patina to it in a way, and that's totally respectable. I mean, every photographer, painter, anyone who work with a medium at some stage like the peculiarities of that particular medium, and I think this idea of moving always toward the latest, and the most realistic and fancy-looking model is just an illusion, and it's sad that we get to forget, what used to be the best we could do 5 years ago, and I believe in, a potential diversity of AI models, like there is diversity everywhere else, and in a way, it's only corporate, for-profit, typically Californian companies and their PR machine, which is really hard to resist, that make you believe that there's only one way and that the next model will be better than the previous one. And there's a sort of unstoppable progress line going on that justify the trillions of dollars put into that system.
Sorry. Thank you first and foremost for the presentation. It's a very fascinating model. I also work with artists, traditional artists, who then tried out AI models. And what I experience is there's a certain sense of frustration regarding agency, that they tend to have a vision to what they would like to see and achieve. And AI models tend to be rather difficult in realizing their vision one-to-one. And this can be interesting and experimental. And I was wondering, what was your experience as feedback from the artists, how they thought about and talked about this negotiation of agency distribution?
Yeah, so that's the Kai paper that we're writing about right now. Yeah, indeed. So here what we like about model crafting is the crafting part of it. So it's not like I train a model and that's it, that's what I got. Like I have a chance to iterate. And in art, we all iterate. I mean, I don't know painters, drawers, or sculptors who, do their best piece on the first attempt like that, just like that. And so why would AI be these magic things where you roll it one time and then you get the final answer? So we really think that, with Autolium, we see artists being like, oh, I'm going to remove all that from the data set, but I'm going to add that. Now that they've seen the first model, they have an idea, and then eventually they appropriate the medium, and then they're like, I know what I need to feed Autolium. And then they start, and then, so they go like, so it takes time, right? Like any practice, there's no, the prompting makes everyone believe that now making art is just, a 6-second operation, but it's not true. And those artists are really conscious of that. Their practice before using Autolium takes time, and they understand that the practice with Autolium and this notion of iterating and training over and over models to find what they find interesting is the way to go. And often, as they do so, they compromise, or they eventually change a little bit the initial vision and find like, it's not going to be exactly like that, but I really like that, so I'm going to go that way. And so this is this organic journey that every artist is having with their own work and their own path, that we observe that happening with Autolium.
Okay, thank you. So we've got one last question here.
Hi, my question is about the homogenization of the aesthetic, because it's very nice. This whole software help people to personalize their artwork, but game-based artwork has a very specific aesthetic. It's not just like a media specific. It's the aesthetic is very specific. Should we concern it will cause another type of homogenization of aesthetic?
Interesting. Yeah, the medium in this case is pretty apparent, and you're right. Most GAN-based model, you can sort of recognize that GAN aesthetic, but so can you recognize an oil painting to be oil-painted, right? Or a photography to be done with, an analog photography to be done with an analog machine. In fact, in music, for example, we typically, people can recognize a Stradivarius by ear, or, and you recognize an instrument, and so you have a medium, and it has its constraint, and some of the constraints are aesthetic, and so you play within the limit of that medium. The constraint, though, in this case, are really like the amount and the variety. I think I showed in the few examples, I showed the variety of content you can get at is still particularly impressive. Like you would take several lifetimes to explore that space. But of course, it is bounded. Every medium has its limits, and that's why we're still working on putting out new medium, right, and new tools, and new, so that we can eventually reach new aesthetics.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Philip. And I think it's a wonderful approach to open the black box and also implementing this idea of slow AI as well, and having this crafting approach that people really understand how it works, how to train a model, and that it's not all that fast and resource intensive.
Yeah, as a last note, I would say we hope to actually teach, we have grants going on to try to teach Autolium in schools, because I agree with you, I think it's a great way to address all the issues of AI and to get people to really understand AI by having kids bringing their data, training their model, using the model, and along the way finding all the problems with data, with training, with model, and with the use of the output. With that, I thank you all.
Thank you. So now I welcome Kevin Blackistone to the stage. We skipped you before. My apologies for that, but the stage is yours now.
Hello. Yeah. My title's also a mouthful. So yes, blending identities and breathing life into radiology through ML-merged volumetric chimeras. What does that mean? In brief, I'm just going to go through the techniques developed to create these radiological chimeras that are based on blending multiple people together, and my presentation is going to be a bit more theory than some of the prior ones about the background of the what and why of the commonalities of the human organism under the flesh. So if we look at depictions of the human, we see a wide array of styles. Of course, they nearly all focus on the common visual layer, even if heavily abstracted. This all makes sense. It's visual art. You're going to represent the visual elements. But of course, with the human body, there's far more complexity than can be thus represented. For as we know, what constitutes the human body includes the microbial inhabitants as well as our interior organic systems. This research focuses on the latter. So the human body is comprised of 11 primary organic systems, of which the skin layer is just one, but it's the one to which we are most associated with those around us, because it's what we can see, what we can touch, and thus also the layer most fraught with bias. By and large, the other systems, excepting those with gendered affiliations, tend to be the same across all of us. In the history of representation of the interior, however, we get two types of representation. One is the grotesque and horrific, sometimes in the context of religious mortuary rites. But I mean, traditionally, to see human insides, something tended to be wrong. So if you're going to show the human insides, it's not going to be a pleasant sight. Then the other form of representation tends to be the medical, which tends towards a rather dry, formal style. But again, typically based on a pathology or understandings of the body typical to or necessary to understand and treat pathologies. Of course, there are some other cultural associations that get used. And several media artworks that I'm not going to address here for time. But since the advent of non-invasive radiology, we now have means to view the human interior outside of these depictions, although for many reasons, including health and safety, these still typically tend towards the medical diagnostic. Looking at this image, one of the things I realized putting this together is that it's kind of interesting that to represent the interior human form, you first have to be fed through the interior of the machine. So anyway, in their abstracted form, though, and lack of physical incision, we can sort of see the characteristics of the human body in a less grotesque manner, and with some versions that are used to highlight tissues in the medical field, there's actual ways to make this a more artistic and interesting representation. But beyond this, I wanted these to not just showcase the commonality, but blend humans together to sort of accentuate the commonality and make these chimeras. And of course, medically, there is no point in this. So there wasn't really any algorithmic structure to make such. What I realized in trying to come up with this is one way to think of a 3D voxel space image is as a series of 2D slices. And since there already exist several options for interframe blending of 2D images, what you can do is slice down 2 different volumes and then use, in this case, I used Google's AI-based frame interpolation for large motion, which is meant for slow motion video. And you can use that to make an interframe and then reblend that into a new volume. So this is sort of what looks like on a slice-by-slice basis. When you focus on the just the result, you see it's a little wobbly. What actually that ends up being a problem with is limitation here is it doesn't understand a coherence between layers. So if you slice top to bottom, but then build the volume and reslice front to back, you see this tearing that's going on versus the original data. So to fix that, I worked on this confirmation system, which a lot of people don't go into the machines in the same orientation. So once you move them to occupy the same voxel space, this tearing significantly reduces, although there's always a bit of blurring around heads because dental work really screws up a CT scan. So the result of this, though, is when you look at it, it's a bit softer, but it still looks as a wholly coherent form. If you didn't see the original, you wouldn't know that it wasn't an original single human, but 2 blended humans. Another reason this is softer is I had to down-res the original data because I was doing this on, I made like 1,700 blends, and that was a lot of time for the free Google Colab that wants to kick me off constantly. But this is the one of the results. So the rendering technique I then used is rather than a typical voxel-based for speed. This is all live rendered through the V4 software package. And this is not actually voxel. This is a stack of transparency-based images. The limitation of that is if you turn it sideways, it disappears. But if you limit the angles to which you're looking, it comes across well. Then to add a bit more life to the animation, there's sort of a noise-based distortion field applied to the 3D volume, and then another noise field that's messing with the transparency. And then with this other representation, you can see there's some shifts based on the ideas that were used for the medical anatomical tissue highlights. But in this case, I wasn't using color shifts that were actually medically useful, but ones that I just thought looked cool. Then I did one more level of this. I sliced individual organs or segmented individual organs based on more of a like metaphorical approach of like the common cultural associations of certain organs, clean them up through Blender, and these are more in the traditional manifold geometry style. And then these were rendered again with similar distortions. Also, these are all live generated and particle dynamics, but in this case, it's a male and female heart, an elder and younger brain, and 3 voice boxes, so just sort of more of a metaphor than the original, let's blend as many chimeras as I can. But going back to that original form that was produced, what ends up being the result is sort of a kind of avatar, but an avatar that is only the unseen organic volumes of the human organism. However, traditional avatars are universally only a hollow shell. They never represent the interior. There's no need to, that would waste a lot of computational resources. But an unfortunate difficulty with our biases based on our surface form is they tend not only to be replicated, but exaggerated in virtual space. And several studies have for some time now shown an array of problematic results of the transfer of these real-life associations to virtual characters. This is just a few. Check Google Scholar, you can find plenty. And no matter how whimsically so, anthropomorphized forms continue to be riddled with visual body concepts of race, gender, age, so on. But this all belies the hidden truth of the human-controlled avatar, that they do, nonetheless, and still, have all of the internal organs of a human because they are controlled by a human that has all of these organs. Likewise, these avatars have all the biological needs of a person because the person behind them still needs to shit. Going a step further, as disembodied voices such as the computer in HAL or now LLM chat services, in addition to the automated AIs used to control non-human avatars in games, begin to fill online spaces with characters that become ever more difficult to tell from the human-controlled ones. It will be the biological needs that separate the two. And as our robotics merge with said AIs to become less discernible from us in the visual sphere, the differentiation might become even more real, requiring perhaps proof by evisceration in order to determine humanity. To wrap up, we're complex organisms that can be visually represented without our visual layer. Such representations of the radiology are one means to accentuate commonality over difference, and this medical imagery is one path to that end. Although while I was conducting this research, two, probably more papers came out, one showing that you actually can tell race in radiology data, and another showing massive diagnostic problems, which with the traditionally disenfranchised group, to probably no one here's surprise. But the merging and rendering techniques here still may be improved, especially through algorithms trained on CT data rather than ones meant for slow motion video, and through algorithms that are aware of persistence amongst the layers. So thank you, and thanks to Interface Cultures and Digital Nature Group for helping me out when I was doing this.
Thank you, Kevin, for this insight into the human body. Questions from the audience? Any questions? Yeah.
Just a quick one. I was wondering where you got your CT data from.
Yes, I meant to include that on the presentation, I forgot. I got the CT data from Kaggle primarily and the Cancer Imaging Archives. I want to note that in getting that data, I intentionally used only control sets because I would feel a bit gross using people dying of cancer as part of my image collection. The Kaggle sets are actually there for AI training for medical training purposes, and also the Cancer Imaging Archives are part of similar. Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Yeah, I would like to link up to this question now, because where's the boundary between artistic exploration and medical depiction? So are there any ethical concerns with regards with regards the usage of images in this context on the one hand, and on the other hand, I think it's interesting with regards to also studies on quantum computing that, I mean, the body is not the skin is not the boundary between us and the environment.
I mean, there kind of is no boundary.
Yeah.
But yes.
But I think you got that question before, probably.
No. The first part, yes, but the quantum reference, not so much. But I think the first part is the bigger hornet's nest here, because of course there's a ton of ethical questions with any artistic use of public data sets, as we've already discussed, and especially with imagery of people's bodies that, while of course there is a consent already there to allow this out into the public sphere, I realized that also I'm using it for a means other than what those people intended. So that's also part of where I think having the blend it works. It's still I still recognize that, like, even to myself, I haven't completely wrapped around all of the issues. But once you have the blend, you're no longer dealing with one person's data. You're not showing, here's a person, but I am still using the data of human beings who have lives that, like, went through some heavy radiation doses to give me this data. So yeah, where is the separation is a hard thing on this. A current project that I'm developing now sidesteps this a little better because I'm doing live ultrasound, and with that one I can talk to my performers. Like, my performers are already in agreement about exactly what's going on. So.
But I think it's an interesting approach, because it could also be viewed as a critique of also biased natural sciences perspectives on the body. So to have a counter perspective from a different view.
Yeah. Oh, and also I should mention, just since one of the other things, since I'm trying to show the inner commonality of people, that's already false, because when I'm going through these data sets, I'm picking the people that have the inner commonality, because I don't want someone, like, where I don't want someone with a pathology to be a part of the data. Like, I'm not choosing the data sets that have someone who has a kidney removed, or like a clear tumor, or like something that actually is different on the inside. So.
Okay. Any other questions, remarks? So thank you for your presentation. And I would like to welcome the next speakers. Ileri, Beste Ileri, and Toprak Firat.
Hello, I'm Toprak. Today we're going to talk about Santimap. I was the technical guy behind it, and Beste will talk about the analysis and the design parts of the research. So what is Santimap? Santimap is actually spatio-temporal mapping of changes of emotions in Istanbul's districts from 1970 to 2024. And our base assumption was that if we can get the newspapers and analyze them, we can understand how emotions, public emotions, are changed by those incidents. So if we can analyze the newspaper to get the incident, we can get how the public emotion is affected. So, but to be able to do that for 50 years of data, which is around 1.5 or 1.1 million articles, either I had to read all of those articles by hand, or I had to use computational tools. And the foundation for that is basically sentiment analysis. The idea behind it is that you feed data, you process text, and you count each word, and you classify the text based on positive or negative. Then you can train models that says, okay, this text has these words, so it's positive, or this text has these words, so it's negative. But the issue is that we want to do emotional analysis, not sentiment analysis. So we need around 6 categories. That means complexity increases, challenges increases. So we need a better feature engineering. We need to analyze data better. And we also need more data because the lines between categories are kind of blurry, like between anger and, I don't know, anxiety. It's kind of harder to separate them when you compare it with positive or negative. Also, another problem that we are facing with is Turkish is morphologically really complex. For example, it's order flexible. So when you say yemek yemeyi severim, which means I love to eat food, you can just swap the words whatever we want, and it will mean the same thing. So we can't really use those n-gram or positional features that we could use in NLP pipelines, workflows, let's say. Also, it's agglutinative language. So we have in Turkish many root words, and we have a lot of suffixes, and we can create infinitely many words that we don't do that, but like you can technically do it. For example, sev is to love. You can say seviyorum, I love, or you can say sevmiyorum. With adding me, it becomes another word, I don't love. So we can't really use those counting word pipelines that typically used in NLP processes. So it's morphologically problematic. Also, there are irregularities as well. If you want to get the root words to make the vocabulary easier for us, that's how typically English NLP processes work. You get the root word. When we tried that in Turkish, let's say su meaning water, and if we add juk suffix, which is a diminutive suffix, it becomes sucuk. So it should mean, like theoretically, it should mean small or cute water, but it actually means spicy sausage. So we can't do that. So can we use neural networks with that? RNNs and LSTM is a good option. They learn from word sequences. They learn the patterns inside the text, basically, and they can handle the suffixes. They don't need to count words, etc. But the problem is they, as they read around like longer text, they start forgetting the information that they were introduced at the beginning. So the information becomes diluted as the text goes. So it doesn't really work for our case because we want to make the model read newspaper articles. So that's why we use LLMs. They have attention mechanism. You feed the text and it just completely understands the text. It creates morphological connections and can transfer the suffix information inside the text. So it's perfect for Turkish and newspaper articles, basically. Also, because we want to categorize the emotions, we need to tell that to the model. So if we wanted to use, for example, a bird model, we had to train it for that. But because of time constraints, we also didn't want to train anything. So we just like, in few-shot learning, you can just say, okay, I want these categories. Here are like couple examples. And here's the text, just help me around it. And it helps us. So for gathering and processing data, we use Cumhuriyet Gazetesi online archive. We collected around 200,000 pages, around 1 million articles. And we parsed these articles, and match with the corresponding district names. And we selected 6 emotions based on psychology literature, and we compared 4 models, and we manually noted 150 newspapers with emotions and checked which one was better for Turkish, and OpenChat won, so we analyzed that. We used that to analyze the rest of the articles, basically. Now, Beste will continue.
Hello, I'm Beste. Thanks again for listening. Now we're going to talk about design framework and analysis, display, and conclusion. Since we're using district level data set, we use district level choropleth map. Each district is colored based on the most frequently occurring emotion in that region for a given month. And the color code was, as you see, was single emotion label. And it's displayed as 2-channel video in the Istanbul Museum of Modern Art. In the first screen, you see flow video. It's a longer one. The map advances to subsequent months every 4 seconds from January 17 to August 2023. And in the second short video, it has analysis with infographics video for each emotion in its color. And it has 3 parts: periodic summits, feelings, apex, and emotion volume. Now for the detail of the second screen, on the left part, you see periodic summits, and it shows peak years, peak dominated years of each emotion. And beneath that, the frequency of the emotion over the years. And top right is feelings apex, top 5 districts per emotion over 54 years. In emotion volume, beneath it, it's layered stack into each other, semi-transparent, like annual layers, becomes a volumetric representation of this whole emotion, and the color and saturations becomes regional density, and this rotating view makes you see local intensities and cross-regional spikes like all over this period. And then SandMap, this artwork doesn't have this conventional sense of interactivity, but it's mostly gives attentional interaction rather than just direct manipulation. You can just using looking at 2 screens, you can do cross-emotional, spatial, and temporal analysis, cross-readings. It's kind of like a semi-guided system of effective discovery. And viewers were invited to pause on their personal memory, political orientation, or their interpretive interest. And yeah, we try to balance to narrative continuity and comparative analysis with 2 screens to viewer to fully engage with the artwork and not in direct manipulative way. Also, beside this technical part, Toprak told this artwork is mostly conceptual work, and we try to emphasize that emotions are not just individual states, but political signals. They're spatially distributed, historically produced, and collectively felt. For the discussion part, since the data set was based on district level mapping, we're thinking that it wouldn't be maybe so representative about political climate, but it was significantly higher degree of political representativeness than anticipated, even it's based on local news. And emotional patterns did align with major political and societal events in Turkey. And we also see emotions cluster regionally, intensify during moments of national upheaval, and sometimes lingered long after the events that triggered them. For the analysis, periodic summits, it was the 5 peak years analysis one. For negative emotions like sadness, anxiety, and anger, we show solely after 2010's peak years all clustered in that time. And for the happiness and hope, it was all the 70s. So there was this drastic table we see, and it was quite interesting because like this negative emotion peakness was surpassing nation's most traumatic event that is called military coup of 80s. We were thinking that was the like most traumatic time, but even like recent political climate show that it's significantly looks worse than in that period. And the thing with the neutrality was also showed the 70s was the peak time, and it gives a question of structural shift toward the emotionally charged and more provocative need discourse over time. For the feelings apex, the highest concentration of anxiety and sadness correspond to socioeconomically disadvantaged areas as expected. And district showed peak values for different negative emotions, largely overlap. Same for the positive emotion patterns as well, as expected. And for the emotion volume, unfortunately, anxiety has been the dominant emotion for the last 54 years. It took the largest space. And the sadness displayed notable increase in upper strata, which means recent years. And accordingly, hope and happiness was decline in the upper strata. And the most important thing for us was emotion volume analysis demonstrated strong alignment with periodic summits. This convergence is significant because periodic summits highlights the numerical peak, but does not capture sustained emotional intensity over time. But emotion volume shows all the volume, so you can understand the temporal trajectory as well. So this overlap between peak frequency years and volumetric spatial density definitely suggested a mutually reinforcing pattern and increased the validity. For the discussion, we had two major topics. One is a case of anger sentiment. As we expected in the news reporting, we expect a neutral tone, and we realized anger were expected to be emotion with the lowest value, but recent years, the emergence of anger was very prominent, and it came up with the question that provocative nature of news discourse in Turkey. For the neutral sentiment as well, the Taifik peak years were concentrated in 70s, but the volumetric analysis shows the dominance in the recent years, and this divergence invites a further inquiry because you're questioning nature of neutral reporting, where does it source from, journalistic objectivity or media suppression, and we can interpret that maybe historical pattern may point to broad sensorial responses to traumatic events in the past, or even contemporary expansion of neutrality could signal more systematic and enduring form of editorial control. We shortly going to see temporal analysis of key historical events. We had this heat map while we were comparing most important historical events like coups, protests, earthquakes, electoral times, and terrorist attacks and economic crisis and stuff, and it was pretty aligning. Finally, for the conclusion, it's beyond its technical part, we wanted to emphasize that how computational methods can enrich the fields of digital humanities and effective media archaeology, and highlight how ephemeral media not only record facts, but encodes effective atmospheres and critically engage with them. So, thank you.
Thanks a lot for this interesting talk. Who has got a question about Sentimap?
Hi, thanks very much. That was super interesting. I was just wondering about if you could comment on the bias of the training data. So there's presumably I don't know, Turkish media, but a political bias in the people who wrote the articles collectively. How do you think that impacts your output?
Yeah, we were actually got into it with thinking about all the biases. Like first with the LLM, kind of still have this cultural Western-centric approach of about emotions, and it may not fully capture the Turkish understanding of emotions, of course, and the other part was, of course, news source. And we try to find the most reliable source, actually, because in recent years in Turkey, there are lots of like polarization and also media suppression is highly intense. So yeah, we try to balance that while picking most reliable source that we can find. But we were still, like, while normalizing the data, very aware of that. Okay, this is the part of the work list, this critical thinking about it. This is not fully true, but yeah, we're going to look at this functional media as well.
Sure, thank you.
Any other questions? I've got a question considering your methods, because I think it's from the perspective of psychogeography, it's very interesting. What do you think? Which other methods could complement your research to dive deeper into this interplay between historical events, affective climate of society, and the transformation over time? Are there any other sources you could use? Because, I mean, it reflects media discourse in a way.
I mean, like, we were thinking about lately, this old media newspaper doesn't really reflect the political environment because it's mostly happening on X or the other social media accounts. So we were thinking about maybe combining its data, social media data, but also it does not go back that far. But we were mostly thinking about gathering other data sources, because many newspapers from minorities as well would work better. But other than that, I cannot think of, like, mostly just written media, I guess. Yeah, we're thinking.
Yeah. It's difficult to access, personal accounts of times. So,
exactly.
Yeah, maybe. Interdisciplinary work with other historical research.
That will be definitely easier, because, like, data access of newspaper was hardest part of the work.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I think we can discuss your project afterwards as well, but we have to speed on a bit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, our last speakers of this session can unfortunately not be here in person, but we will have a pre-recorded talk now and the possibility to have a Q&A via Teams afterwards. So I would like to introduce you to Reva White and Chung Kim and Simon Howden.
Hello, everybody. My name is Reva Wright, and I'm here with my colleague June Kim.
Hello, I'm June Kim.
And we'll be presenting our new research, Beyond Instrumentalism, Post-Human Assemblages and AI in Contemporary Animation, co-authored with Simon Howden.
Yes, drawing from Deleuze and Guattari's assemblage theory and Braidotti's post-human ethics, this research positions AI-assisted animation within a broader philosophical tradition, emphasizing relationality, becoming, and material vitality. Animation in post-human era emerges not as products and objects, but as a dynamic assemblage across human and mechanics and ecological registers. So this perspective shifts away from anthropocentric frameworks toward a relational ontology where creativity is distributed across entangled assemblage. And as you can see, like a tiny letters, the technical object must be considered as a participant as a genesis, not as an inert result. Like Simondon said, we just used that. And Gilbert Demandon challenges instrumental conceptions of technology, propositions that technical object must be understood as the dynamic systems engaged in ongoing process of becoming. So we see that like AI systems that underpin contemporary animations are not stable instruments, but participants in dynamic techno-assemblage, AI assemblage, which is emergent and unpredictable and co-instituted through material and semiotic entanglement.
Of course, sustainability, planetary ethics, and energy systems are very important to our study. So we did a comparison looking at energy usage from the ICT sector. We can see 4% of global electricity is being used by the ICT sector. AI data centers are causing a huge spike in energy demand. However, there's a lot of research carrying on at the moment where people are urgently addressing this hungry energy demand of AI and data centers. So there is actually a lot of new technologies on the way to try to reduce energy demand. So just as energy demand for, say, for example, the Ethereum blockchain network was mitigated by a transition from proof of work to proof of stake at the end of 2022, and the Ethereum virtual machine became carbon neutral, we do believe that a similar thing will happen in relation to AI and energy usage. Barad has talked extensively about how technical infrastructures can shape environments. So this is something which we need to keep an eye on in the future. Of course, we also have Jevons paradox, which lets us know that efficiency does not equal less use of energy. It's important to put culture before profit, and I think as artists and animators and filmmakers, culture is something that's always at the foreground of our minds. So our idea is that creative industries need to develop, in line with Braidotti's ideas, a kind of zoe-ethical awareness, recognizing that visual cultural production participates materially within planetary life systems. It doesn't stand apart. We are all part of the same entangled network of interspecies and multi-species frameworks. We also need to be careful about a cultural homogenization risk. So this is posed by closed feedback loops in AI training that might narrow aesthetic diversity, reinforcing dominant styles and marginalizing minority perspectives. Most animators who've played with AI have probably seen the famous Studio Ghibli models, which Hayao Miyazaki has derided. And I think that's a very valid concern, because there is that line where one artist's style can be homogenized within within generative AI, and then others can simply make copies. However, this is not really creativity if you are simply copying another person's style. So what our research emphasizes is the collaboration between AI and machine to create original imaginative artwork. Environmental impact is important. Of course, we need to look at the burden placed on power grids, and we have an ethical imperative here for future animation that it should be culturally and ecologically restorative rather than extractive, honoring the capacity, as Braidotti says, to be good ancestors. So how does collaboration sit? Well, there's a huge potential with human-machine collaboration, and artists working with AI and other algorithms for decades have been exploring this important area. Just to mention a couple of recent examples that blur boundaries and encourage new artistic practices. We have Madrid-based Instituto Stokos, who have been exploring AI as a non-human creator. Choreographer Muriel Romero sonified her movements through algorithmic AI processes, transforming embodied gesture into light and sound. We have the groundbreaking work of Avital Meshi, which is called GPT-Me. Avital is performing, actually, I think next week at Duke Arts. Her performance art is known for its intimate engagement with AI, where she's wearing her GPT-Me device on her wrist and whispering to it and it's whispering back and she's speaking the words. So it's blurring the lines between her own cognition, her own verbal expression, and AI's verbal expression through her. So these examples exemplify creative engagement with emergent multi-relational fields rather than looking at a human-dominated technological mastery. So there are some valid human-centered concerns, and these need to be urgently addressed. The first is that AI could disrupt labor and artistic agency. So my example of Miyazaki, we can see there that his agency has not only been disrupted as an artist, but his copyright has been infringed. So this is a legal issue as well as an ethical and cultural issue. We need to think about how automation might homogenize aesthetic labor. So we need to always keep our human creativity at the front of mind, always pushing the boundaries to make sure that it's a human-in-the-loop workflow. We also need to think about ethics and authorship. Make sure that we're not, when we're using AI, we are creating our own ethical databases, creating our own models, using systems such as LoRa, which allow modification, and experimenting with the other craft-based interventionist AI systems that are emerging in the field. The issue of authorship is very important. However, we believe new frameworks legally are needed to address this because it's not really an option to discourage human AI collaboration. There's no returning to human-only workflow in art. We believe in terms of animation, AI is already out of the box. It's already in most animation studios. So there needs to be new legal frameworks developed which can actually handle the idea that human authorship is also shared with AI authorship to make sure that humans are being responsibly and appropriately paid for their labors. June?
Okay. Yeah, hallucinations and visionary error is actually a big thing from a technical perspective. Like from technical view, these are the error to eliminate and remove. But we just try to see this as from the a post-humanistic view. So rather than framing these hallucinations as a technical malfunctioning, we just analyze this one as a excessive creative access. So artists and creative folks, we really into some kind of accidental creativities. So hallucinations often makes a problem, but on the other side, it also creates some kind of creativity. So from Braidiotis' perspective, hallucination express Zoe as a generative, unpredictable force of life that exceeds anthropocentric control. So creativity rises from irreducible intensibility of living matters, like a hallucination as a AI creative overflow, and Barat says that unpredictable interactions, and Aron says that recursive degenerations risk, and hallucination as a visions. But if I just add a bit of my opinions for the ethics, if you don't mind, maybe we can move to our next slides. Because I've already actually mentioned this one, I combined. And, while empathizing these relational creativity, we definitely must attend to tangible human concerns, as everyone mentioned. So the incorporations of AI raises critical questions about instrumentalizations of creative labor, and that threatens traditional craft practices and that anchors artistic identity. So ethical task is not to reject technological mediations, but to cultivate it critically and relationally, fostering our practices that affirms rather than erode the diversity of the modern human world.
Right. So one of the ways that we can look a little bit more at the ethical decentralization that June has been talking about is using models that are actually low energy and that require less fine tuning, that are more efficient. And LoRa is one model that a lot of us have been using in animation and digital art. LoRa is interesting because it's a very modifiable and it resists a kind of monocultural foundational model. It also therefore supports vernacular styles, even indigenous styles. As a First Nations person, I think this is very exciting and it will create more diversity and inclusion, I think, in the AI space. And it also aligns with a more open and pluralistic infrastructure. So just putting together all of our research, this is a position paper, as we mentioned, and we're very, this is a new, I suppose, approach in the field, which we are trying to build upon. So we obviously are trying to create a balance between a critical engagement, a technical engagement, and a creative engagement. So we want to acknowledge that technical evolution is very important, and we are fully supportive of AI technologies. But we also want to have balance and address some of the human-centered concerns, but also the planetary concerns in terms of multi-species justice, especially around energy use. We want to keep environmental ethics at the forefront and try to foster inclusive practices within AI. So just to quote from our paper, all applications of AI should be for social good with a community-centered focus to genuinely create benefits that minimize the digital divide and authentically work towards building an inclusive society. So thank you very much, and we're looking forward to question time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for your presentation. Hi. Yeah, are there any questions? We've got maybe 2 more minutes for comments or questions. No questions from the audience, but I've got one question or remark. Considering your research, did you also explore the analogies between biological systems and artificial intelligence? Because that's a research project I'm in at the moment, so I found a lot of connecting points.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, great, yeah. It's always hard to know, right? I'm in Brisbane at the moment. It's like midnight, and June is in California at 6 a.m. So yeah, I think the biomimicry is really fascinating with AI because it's a type of computational biomimicry, as you know, but there's also this introspection there, right? Where people are having now these very intimate conversations with AI, thinking beyond the generative visual side, but the everyday side where people on a daily basis are telling their most intimate secrets to AI and asking advice and creating these bonds and relationships. So I think there's almost an argument to be made where we might think of AI as a type of really introspective biomimicry, but then it will eventually advance to the stage where we will have to think of it as a species, potentially, right? Because it will become sentient to, right, a level where, we feel as humans that it is like an extension of ourselves or an exteriorization, I suppose, as Stiegler might say, the idea around exteriorization. So yes, I think there's a lot there in biomimicry. That's why we were sort of looking at it through the post-human lens, thinking about, what might happen in the future in terms of multi-species justice potentially being applied to AI. Yeah, but actually, if I were writing, there's so many angles that we could write this from, and actually I think there's a series of articles here probably for our group, because I think a lot of what Stiegler is saying about techniques is extremely relevant to AI. I just went with the post-human side because, of course, feminism is really important to me, and highlighting key female thinkers like Haraway Barad and Braidoti is politically close to my heart. But I think in terms of the pure theory side, actually Stiegler has a tremendous amount to offer, like especially once we start talking about the possibility of sentient AI.
Okay, thank you. Thank you a lot for being there online. And I think it's time to close this panel now. Yeah, I think it was an interesting concluding lecture now. And yeah, you will now have a short break until 4 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Margarita. Thank you. Hi.